My name is Eliseo. I was 42 years old and had been a pastor for 15 years when all this happened to me. It was August 2019, a Thursday I will never forget, the 15th, to be exact. I was pastoring a medium-sized church in the Jardines del Val neighborhood here in Mexicali, with about 300 members at that time. That night I was alone in the sanctuary keeping vigil, something I always did when my heart was burdened. The church was going through serious financial problems, members were leaving, offerings were falling, and overdue bills were piling up. I needed to hear from God. I needed direction, an answer that would give me clarity. It was 3:00 a.m. when something strange began to happen. The air inside the church became dense, heavy, different from the dry heat of Mexicali, which we know so well. It was as if the air itself had gained weight. You know what I mean. My heart began to race in a way I had never felt before. It felt like it was going to explode in my chest. Suddenly, without my consent, my knees buckled and I fell hard to the ground. It was as if an invisible hand was pressing me down, forcing me to my knees. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Something was holding me down, something powerful that kept me in that position. That's when the vision began. It wasn't a dream. I was wide awake. But it was as if a movie was unfolding before my eyes. I began to see people I knew very well. They were members of my own congregation, people who sat in the pews every Sunday. I saw Liliana's face, that young woman with curly hair who sang in the worship team. I saw Osvaldo, the deacon with the neatly pressed shirt, who always helped collect the offerings, and they were screaming in a desperate way that tore at my soul. They were engulfed in flames with expressions of terror and regret I had never seen on a human face. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. It was as if I needed to see it, as if God were forcing me to witness something I had ignored for too long. Tears began to stream uncontrollably down my face, soaking my shirt. That's when I felt a presence beside me. I slowly turned my head and saw a being of light standing there, watching me intently. Later I understood that it was an angel, but at that moment I only knew that it was something supernatural, something that didn't belong to this world. It had a serious, almost sad expression, as if it carried a great weight. The angel looked at me and said in a voice that resonated throughout my being, "Elisha, you need to see what happens to those who steal from God." I was trembling from head to toe, wanting to understand what this meant. Stealing from God? How could that be? These people were believers, they were churchgoers. They sang, they prayed, they raised their hands in services, but before I could ask any questions, the angel continued in a grave voice, "What you are seeing is only the beginning. There is much more you need to understand about divine justice." And then the vision began to change, to deepen, showing me things that went far beyond what I had imagined possible. The temperature in the temple dropped sharply despite the August heat. I felt a chill run down my spine as the vision intensified before my eyes. I knew that my life and my ministry were about to change forever, that after that night I would never again be the same pastor I had been for 15 years. The vision continued, and the angel began to explain something that left me completely shaken. He showed me that during all these years in my ministry, I had preached about almost every sin. I spoke about adultery, lying, stealing, vices, and addictions, but there was one specific sin that I treated lightly. As if it weren't really that serious, the tithe. The angel said, and I felt a tightness in my chest that took my breath away. In my mind, the tithe was something negotiable, you know? If a person was unemployed, it was okay not to give it. If they had a family emergency, God would understand. That's how I thought, and I ended up passing that same carelessness on to the church members. The angel pointed ahead, and the scene changed completely. I saw a woman leaving the church after the Sunday service, walking down the dark street toward her home. I recognized her instantly. It was Sister Veronica, who had lost her job as a cashier about 2 months earlier. She was walking home alone, tired, with slumped shoulders. That's when I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Above her head was a red mark glowing in the air like a target painted with bright fire. The mark pulsed, It drew attention. It was impossible not to see it in the spiritual realm. "What is that?" I asked the angel in a loud voice, trembling, but he only raised his hand asking me for silence. Out of nowhere, 3 horrible creatures appeared, emerging from the shadows of the street. They were grotesque, with twisted bodies that blended human and animal form. They had long, filthy claws, open mouths full of teeth as sharp as rusty needles. They began to follow Sister Veronica, sniffing the air around her, licking her lips as if they were starving. She withheld the tithe for 6 months in a row. The angel explained in a firm, emotionless voice, "Each month that passes without obedience, the mark becomes stronger, more visible to the spiritual realm. Now these demons have legal permission to act in her life, to devour everything she has." I wanted to scream, I wanted to run and warn Sister Veronica, but I couldn't move an inch. "But she's unemployed," I argued desperately, trying to defend her with all my strength. "How can God demand a tithe from someone who doesn't have money to eat?" The angel looked at me with a mixture of sadness and firmness that pierced my heart like a sword. It was as if he knew exactly what I was going to say. "It's not about the money," Elisha answered slowly, each word weighing on my conscience like stones. "It's about obedience, it's about faith. When someone says, 'I'm not going to give because I need more,' that person is putting themselves in God's place. They are saying they trust themselves more than the one who holds up the entire universe with his word." The vision changed again, and I saw those creatures entering Sister Veronica's house in the colony where she lived. I saw her young son getting sick without any medical explanation, the doctors running tests and finding absolutely nothing wrong. I saw the utility bills arriving duplicated, the receipts multiplying inexplicably, the mark above his head becoming increasingly ever brighter, attracting more and more demons to her. Every deliberate disregard for the Holy Spirit opens another door. The angel said, pointing to the creatures that now completely filled the house, "And once the door is open, Elisha, it is very difficult to close it. These are the devourers of blessings, and they have legal permission granted by the very person who made them to devour everything God had prepared for her. She herself gave them access through her disobedience." I watched as Sister Veronica's life slowly crumbled, job opportunities appearing and then mysteriously disappearing, money vanishing without explanation, small but constant accidents, all while these creatures surrounded her, feeding on every blessing that tried to reach her, blocking every door God tried to open on her behalf. The vision dissolved for a moment, and I returned to the reality of the empty church, still on my knees, sweating profusely despite the air conditioning. My heart was beating erratically, and I was trying to process everything I had just seen with my own eyes. But the angel continued there beside me, silent, as if waiting for me to calm down a bit before continuing. It was at that moment that my mind drifted to a specific member of the church, Renato. He was 35 years old at the time. He was a tall man, always well-dressed, in a dress shirt, impeccably pressed, his hair slicked back with gel, his beard precisely trimmed. He even took a certain pride in his appearance. He always said that in business, image is everything. Renato worked as a manager at an automotive parts distribution company here in Mexico and earned a good 12,000 pesos a month, which was a decent salary in 2019. He was married to Paulina, who had been an evangelical Christian since childhood and was the one who brought him to the church back in 2017. They had 2 beautiful daughters, Camila, 7, and Valentina, just 4. His family was the kind every pastor is happy to have, and the congregation, you know. They always arrived on time, always sat in the front rows, and actively participated in the services. Renato was friendly, greeting everyone, always with that confident smile of someone who has his life under control. But I had noticed something strange during the previous months. Every time it was time for offerings and tithes, I saw Renato take the envelope out of his Bible and place it in the basket like everyone else. But something bothered me. It was a strange feeling I couldn't explain in words. After a few months of observing, I decided to speak with him discreetly. It was a Sunday after the service. I called him to the pastor's office for a conversation I thought would be brief. "Renato, "Can I ask you a personal question?" I said, trying to be delicate about the subject. He continued smiling, calm, confident, as he always was. "Of course, Pastor. Tell me whatever you need." "You tithe, brother?" I saw her smile waver for half a second, but she quickly composed herself skillfully. "Pastor, I'm going to be honest with you," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "I have a lot of respect for those who tithe, I really do, but I've studied this topic, and tithing is from the Old Testament. Jesus never charged anyone for it in the New Testament." He continued with this argument, which I had heard several times before. "Besides, Pastor, I help my mother-in-law every month with 1,500 pesos because she's sick. I pay for the girls' private school, which costs 2,000 pesos each. I donate to foundations for children with cancer. That's already my tithe, don't you think? I'm helping real people, people who really need it." The way he spoke was so convincing that it even seemed to make logical sense. I tried to explain to him about obedience, about the spiritual principle behind tithing, about the protection that comes with faithfulness, but he had an answer for everything, a well-crafted justification for each point. He left the office that day still smiling, still confident, still thinking he had everything under control and that his logic was superior, and I let it go. I didn't insist, I didn't warn him with the necessary firmness. That was my grave mistake. 3 months after that vision, in August 2019, around November, Renato sought me out after the evening service, but the man who appeared before me was no longer that confident, well-dressed manager I knew. His shirt was wrinkled. He had lost a lot of weight. He had deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept for weeks, and his hands were visibly trembling incessantly. "Pastor Eliseo, there's something very wrong in my house," he said in a low, broken voice, looking over his shoulder as if he expected to see someone lurking there in the empty church. "I need to talk. I need to contact you urgently. It's very serious." I don't know what else to do. For the first time I'd ever met him, I saw real fear in the eyes of this man who always seemed so self-assured. "Pastor Eliseo, something is destroying my life," Renato said, his voice trembling, as he sat down on a pew at the front while I closed the church doors. "I need to tell you everything that's been happening because I feel like I'm going crazy." From the pallor of his face and the trembling in his hands, I could see that something very serious was going on. I sat down beside him and asked him to tell me everything calmly, without rushing. He took several deep breaths before beginning, his hands still trembling on his knees. "It all started in July of this year, Pastor. The company where I work began having very strange problems, things that simply don't have any logical explanation." Renato told me that a new delivery truck belonging to the company broke down completely out of nowhere. They lost 120,000 pesos worth of damaged merchandise. The mechanic said he had never seen anything like it. "Pastor, the truck was only 6 months old, had been regularly maintained, and suddenly all the systems failed at the same time, as if something had sabotaged it, but nobody touched that truck," he explained. His voice filled with frustration. The following week, 3 major clients cancelled their contracts without giving a clear or convincing reason. One of them had been working with us for over 10 years, Renato said, running a hand over his tired face. "They called saying they were going to change suppliers, but when I asked why, the man couldn't explain it well. He just said he felt he had to, just like that." The company quickly began to experience financial difficulties, but the worst, he confided in me, was happening at home. His youngest daughter, Valentina, 4, started waking up screaming every night in the early hours. Without fail, she says there's a black shadow standing in the corner of the room. "Pastor," Renato said, his voice breaking, "a shadow that stares at her all night, that laughs softly when she tries to cover herself with the blankets. Paulina has tried everything she can think of. We left the hallway light on, put a crucifix on the wall. We even slept in the room with Valentina some nights, but the girl still sees that thing, still terrified of being alone in the room." I saw tears welling up in Renato's eyes as he spoke of his young daughter, his wife, Paulina also started having terrible nightmares every night without fail. She wakes up drenched in sweat, crying, saying she dreamed of the house on fire, the girls drowning in the river, horrific accidents, always horrible things. Pastor, every single day without fail. Renato was visibly desperate, his voice trembled with every word he spoken. It was then that he rolled up his shirt sleeve and showed me something that took my breath away completely. He had purple marks on his arm, like long fingers squeezing his skin with brutal force. I wake up with these marks almost every week, Pastor, a new one each time. It's as if something is holding me down during the night while I sleep, keeping me tight so I can't escape. And there's more. He continued, now almost whispering with obvious fear. I feel something watching me all the time in the house, I'm at work, when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower. It's a heavy, oppressive presence that follows me everywhere. Sometimes I hear low laughter when I'm alone in a room, and the worst part, the very worst part, is that I know it's not my imagination. Pastor, this is completely real. Something is hunting me and my family. That same week as our conversation, Renato was fired from the auto parts distributor. The owner told him he was distracted, lacking focus, making serious mistakes that weren't typical of him. 3 weeks after losing his job, his eldest daughter, Kamla, 7, fell down the stairs at home and broke her right arm. The girl swore, crying desperately, that something had pushed her from behind. But there was absolutely no one else there. I saw Renato's face crumble before my eyes. This man, who had been so proud, so confident in his own wisdom and logic, was now completely broken. Pastor, please help me. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm going to lose my whole family, my sanity, my life. Something is destroying me, and I don't understand why this is happening. Tears finally streamed down his face as he pleaded with me desperately. After hearing all of that from Renato, I went home that night with a completely oppressed heart. I couldn't sleep well. I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about the vision I had had, the angel's words, and now everything that was happening to a family in my church. Everything was connected in some way that I was only beginning to understand. In the early hours of the following morning, around 2 a.m., the vision returned with even greater force. I was lying down, but wide awake, when I felt that same heavy presence filling the entire room. The angel appeared again, this time with an even more serious expression than before, almost solemn. You need to understand how God's justice works, he told me, without any beating around the bush or preamble. Suddenly I was no longer in my room. It was as if we had been transported to another completely different place, a place that seemed infinite, with columns of light rising without any visible end. In the center was something gigantic, the size of an entire wall of my house. It was a book, an ancient, enormous book, with pages that shone like aged gold under a celestial light. Every person has an account recorded here, the angel explained. Walking slowly toward the book, he ran his hand over the cover with reverence and extreme care. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is ever forgotten. Every peso that comes in, every peso that is deliberately withheld, is recorded with perfect precision on these pages. My heart began to race as he slowly started to turn the pages. He stopped on a specific page, and I saw Liliana's name written there in absolutely perfect calligraphy. Liliana Campos said at the top, member since 2015, monthly income, 4,800 pesos, tithes owed 23,400 pesos, tithes paid, 0 status, debtor, and below in red letters that seemed to burn, time of torment equivalent, 400 years. I fell to my knees when I saw that overwhelming number, 400 years. My God, 400 years for 23,000 pesos. Angel, this is unfair, I cried out, tears streaming uncontrollably from my eyes. She's a good girl, she sings in the worship, she comes to all the services. How can it be 400 years of torment for money? The angel looked at me with such deep sadness in his eyes that he seemed to carry the weight of entire centuries. It's unfair for someone to say they love God, but not trust Him, not even with 10% of what He Himself gave them. she answered with a firm voice, but full of pain. "It's unfair to sing, 'Everything is yours, Lord,' on Sunday and live 'Everything is mine' the rest of the week." It's not about the value of money, Eliseo, it's about how many times she consciously chose to disobey when the Holy Spirit spoke to her. My hand trembled uncontrollably when, without asking permission, I desperately turned other pages of that gigantic book. I saw the name Osvaldo Ruiz, 600 Years of Torment. I saw the name Renato Saldivar, 350 years. I saw the name Veronica Pachko, 280 years recorded. Each name had a detailed account, month by month, of absolutely everything that had been withheld with full awareness. "How many from my church are here?" I asked, my voice completely broken, barely able to get the words out. The angel turned several pages, quickly, pausing at different points, counting meticulously with his finger. He looked at me with that serious expression and said a number that made me feel as if the ground were completely disappearing beneath my feet. "From your church, Elisha, 43 people are on this list of debtors, 43 who claim to serve God with their lips, who raise their hands in worship, who sing with emotion, who pray fervently, but consciously steal from Him, month after month, year after year, without repentance." I felt like I was going to faint right there. I wanted this to be just a horrible nightmare, but I knew deep down that it was too real to be a lie. The angel slowly closed the book and looked me straight in the eyes. Every deliberate refusal to obey the Holy Spirit adds time. Every time the Spirit whispers, "Give," and the person responds, "No, I need more," years are added. It is not God who is cruel, Elisha. It is the hardness of the human heart that determines the sentence. Conscious rebellion has a very high price in eternity. Liliana was 28 years old and worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic on Juarez Avenue. She was a pretty young woman with abundant curly hair, which she always tied in a high, neat bun, an easy smile, and a voice as sweet as honey. Everyone at church liked her. She was one of those people who greeted everyone, always lively during praise, always willing to help with whatever was needed. She earned 2.5 minimum wages at that time, nothing extraordinary, but enough to live with dignity. She lived alone in a small, one-bedroom apartment in the Pueblo Nuevo neighborhood, which she proudly said she paid for with her own hard work. She had never depended on anyone. She had always been independent since leaving her parents' house at 23. After that vision of the book, with all the names recorded, I knew I needed to speak with her urgently. I called Liliana to the pastor's office one Wednesday afternoon, when the church was empty and no one would interrupt us. "Liliana, can I ask you a personal question?" I said when she sat down in the chair across from my desk with her usual smile. She was still smiling, relaxed and confident. "Of course, Pastor, tell me what you need to know." I took a deep breath and got straight to the point without beating around the bush. "You tithe, sister." The smile vanished from her face in that very instant. I saw tears welling up in her eyes. Even before frustration appeared on her expression, she looked away toward the window, biting her lower lip hard. "Pastor, you don't know how difficult it is for me," she began, her voice trembling noticeably. "I live alone. I pay 3,500 pesos in rent. I have to pay for water, electricity, internet, food, bus fare. Sometimes I don't even have enough left to eat decently at the end of the month, and you want me to give 480 pesos to the church every month." Her voice began to rise as emotion completely overwhelmed her. "I have a dream, Pastor," she continued, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "I want to study nursing. It's all I've ever wanted since I was a little girl. I've already saved 8,000 pesos. I've been saving for 2 whole years for that. If I start tithing now, it's going to delay my plans by at least 2 more years. I'm going to get my degree first. I'm going to achieve that dream, and then, when I'm a nurse and earning more, then I'll go, to begin decimating as it should be done." "So, are you choosing your plans over God?" I asked her in the gentlest voice I could muster, with no intention of attacking or judging her. She became visibly upset, angrily wiping away her tears, and abruptly rising from her chair. "Pastor, with all due respect, But this tithing thing is very controversial and contentious. There are so many people online saying it's the work of thieving pastors who want to get rich at the expense of poor members. I prefer to save my money and use it when I deem it necessary for things I truly and urgently need," she said, gripping her purse tightly. "I serve God in other important ways. I sing in worship, I pray every day, I read my Bible every night before going to sleep. That doesn't count for anything. It's all just money." I tried to explain the vision to her, the heavenly book she had seen with her name written in it, the 400 years of torment recorded, but she wouldn't listen to a word more. She shook her head repeatedly, already at the door of the office, ready to leave. "Forgive me, Pastor, but I don't agree with that at all. God isn't interested in such a cold way," and she left, slamming the door shut, visibly offended and upset with me. I sat there silently, knowing in my heart that something terrible was going to happen to her, but unable to do anything to prevent it. 2 months later, in January 2020, Liliana had a motorcycle accident on her way home from work around noon. She crashed into a light pole near Juarez Avenue, where she worked. Nothing physically serious, some scrapes on her arm and leg. Her face was bruised, but she sought me out, trembling with fear, 2 days after the accident, urgently asking to talk. "Pastor, what happened was so strange and terrifying," Liliana said, sitting in my office, still with bandages on her face. On her arm, she was pale as wax, with deep dark circles under her eyes, completely different from the lively girl I knew so well. "Moments before the accident, I swear to God I saw a black shadow cross directly in front of my motorcycle without any warning," I continued explaining, my voice trembling. "It wasn't a normal person like you and me, Pastor. It was like black smoke in the shape of a person, but with eyes, and that thing looked me straight in the eyes and smiled in a horrible way. It was a smile full of pure evil, of hatred." Then I completely lost control of the motorcycle and crashed into the pole, unable to do anything. I felt that familiar chill run down my spine as she spoke. A week after the motorcycle accident, Liliana returned from work at 7 p.m., and found her apartment completely ransacked. The strangest thing of all, Pastor, is that the door was completely untouched, without any damage. The lock didn't have a single scratch, not a single mark, absolutely nothing. But when I went inside, it was a total disaster, complete chaos. Her voice trembled as she began to list everything that had been stolen. "They took my laptop, which I bought on a 12-month payment plan and was still paying for. They took my 40-inch television, which was my pride and joy, my grandmother's jewelry, which was the only memory I had of her." She stopped, took a deep breath, and continued in a broken voice, "And they took the money I kept in an envelope inside my bedroom closet, hidden among my clothes." "How much was in that envelope?" I asked, already suspecting what the exact answer would be. Liliana began to cry uncontrollably. 8,000 pesos, Pastor. I saved that money for 2 whole years. It was all the money for my university tuition, for my dream of becoming a nurse. They took absolutely everything, everything I had saved with so much sacrifice for so long." She placed her face in her hands and she wept desperately. I quickly did the calculation in my head. 2 years saving her tithe of 480 pesos a month. That was exactly 8,000 pesos. It wasn't some twist of fate, it was spiritual mathematics working exactly as the angel had shown me in the vision. The devourer had full legal permission to take what she had withheld, but the worst was yet to come in her life. A week after the mysterious theft, in March 2020, Liliana was returning from her night shift after a long and exhausting one. She was waiting for the bus at the stop there on Juarez Avenue, tired after a long day at the dental clinic. There was hardly anyone on the street at that late hour. It was then that she felt someone stop right beside her without making a sound. He was a tall, well-dressed man in a dark, elegant suit, with a strange and unsettling smile on his face. "Liliana," he said in a soft but chilling voice. She was immediately surprised because she didn't know this man from anywhere. "How do you know my name, sir?" she asked, cautiously taking a step back. The man laughed in a way that sent a chill down her spine despite the characteristic heat of Mexico. I know you very well, Liliana. I know every decision you've made in your life, every choice you've made. He moved closer to her, maintaining that unsettling smile. Do you think God really cares about a few pesos? You're intelligent, you need to think of yourself first, and you've been doing exactly that. I completely agree with all your decisions and choices. At that precise moment, Liliana looked directly into his eyes, unable to stop herself, and what she saw made her fall to her knees right there on the sidewalk in front of the crowded bus stop. She swore to me later, sobbing hysterically, "Pastor." His eyes, for a second I saw fire burning inside those eyes. I saw pure hatred, absolute evil like I had never seen before. That wasn't a normal man. What was standing in front of me wasn't human. Liliana screamed the name of Jesus right there on the sidewalk with all the strength she had left in her body. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. She repeated it several times in a row, trembling with absolute terror, and when she finally opened her eyes again to look, the man had completely disappeared. He hadn't run anywhere, he hadn't gotten into any vehicle, he simply vanished into thin air as if he had never been there. And do you know what the scariest thing about all this is, Pastor? She told me the next morning, still visibly trembling. There were about 5 people waiting for the bus with me at that same stop. When I asked them if anyone had seen the man in the dark suit, they all looked at me like I was completely crazy. No one saw a thing, only I saw him standing there. He gripped my hand desperately. Pastor, I need to get my life right with God right now, immediately, before it's too late for me. Liliana did something that, to this day, deeply impresses me with her courage and determination. She went to the bank the next morning and took out a personal loan of $23,400, exactly the total amount she owed in tithes. Since joining the church in 2015, I'm going to pay off this entire debt in one fell swoop, she said, her eyes filled with absolute determination. I'd rather owe money to the bank 1,000 times than owe it to God and risk my eternal soul. The following Sunday, Liliana arrived at church with that heavy envelope in her hand, trembling with nerves. She went to the front during the offering and tithe collection. She asked for the microphone, her voice still trembling with emotion. Brothers and sisters, I need to confess something very serious before all of you, she began, and the entire church fell silent. I've been a member of this church for 5 years, and I've never given a single penny in tithes, not one in all this time. I thought I knew better than God, she continued, weeping uncontrollably. I thought my plans were more important than obedience to Him, and because of that pride and rebellion, I saw Him with my own eyes. I looked directly into His eyes, filled with fire. He came to congratulate me for robbing God, for following His path of destruction instead of the path of blessing. The entire church was weeping along with her in that powerful moment. She placed the thick envelope on the altar with trembling hands and fell to her knees before the entire congregation. Lord, forgive me for having been so proud and foolish. Forgive me for putting my dream of college above you. I choose to obey you now, no matter the price I have to pay. It was one of the most impactful and powerful moments I have witnessed in my 15 years of pastoral ministry. Do you know what happened exactly 1 month after that Sunday? The dental clinic where Liliana worked called her for an important meeting. The owner of the clinic told her he was deeply impressed with her dedication and responsibility and that he was going to promote the administrative coordinator for all the branches. A new salary, 8,600 pesos a month, an 80% increase in one fell swoop, almost double what I was earning. Pastor, in exactly 1 year, I managed to completely pay off the bank loan, Liliana told me, radiant with joy, in 2021. And do you know what the most incredible thing about all this is? After I started faithfully tithing every month, I have more money left over at the end of the month than I did before when I earned less and didn't tithe. It doesn't make any sense in normal human math, but it makes perfect sense in God's divine math. Today, in 2025, Liliana is one of the most generous people in the entire church and leads the entire worship ministry. She always shares her testimony with new members, That man at the bus stop wasn't human at all. It was God himself coming to congratulate me for being on the direct path to eternal destruction. That horrible night saved me from the damnation of hell and changed my life forever. But not all the stories had such a happy and restorative ending as Liliana's. There was still Osvaldo's case, and this one still pains me deeply to this day when I tell it, because the damage was permanent and irreversible. His case served as a stark warning to the entire church about what happens when we play with God's sacred things for too long without repentance. Osvaldo was 52 years old and had been a respected deacon in the church for 5 years when I discovered the terrible truth about him. He was a man highly respected by the entire